and turned to face her. You're a means to an end. Try not to overthink it. They'd reached the second floor. Damien pushed open a door, the third one on the left, just as he'd said. Elena's breath caught. The room was beautiful. Not the cold minimalism of the rest of the house, but warm and carefully designed. A massive four-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in soft cream linens. The walls were a warm taupe, and actual artwork hung on them, not the stark black and white photography that filled the rest of the house, but colorful abstracts that felt alive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same stunning views, but gauzy curtains softened the harsh light. There was even a reading nook with a plush armchair and built-in bookshelves, already filled with books. You said it was furnished, Elena breathed. You didn't say it was habitable. Damien leaned against the doorframe. I'm not a monster, Elena. I don't expect you to suffer unnecessarily. You're here because I need you, not because I want to torture you. Elena moved to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. Jane Austen. The Bronte sisters. Toni Morrison. Maya Angelou. Every classic she'd mentioned loving in interviews over the years, every author she'd praised in her book club newsletter. You've been watching me, she said quietly. I told you. I'm thorough. Damien pushed off the doorframe. Your bathroom is through there. Walk-in closet is already set up with hangers. Marcus will bring your bags up shortly. Dinner is still at 7, that gives you 2 hours to settle in. He was almost out the door when Elena spoke. Why? He turned back. Why what? Why make it nice? Why fill the shelves with books I'd like? Why give me a reading nook when you could have just thrown a mattress on the floor? Elena met his eyes. You want me to suffer, don't you? You want me to pay for my father's sins. So why create a space that's actually comfortable? Damien was quiet for a long moment. The setting sun through the windows painted him in shades of amber and shadow, making him look less like a man and more like something ancient and unknowable. Because, he finally said, his voice low and rough, revenge doesn't mean I have to be cruel to you every second of every day. It means your father has to live with the knowledge that I own you. That I control every aspect of your life. That the perfect daughter he thought he'd groomed to marry up and secure his legacy is instead married to the son of the man he destroyed. He stepped closer, close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating from him. Your comfort doesn't change that, he continued. Your happiness or unhappiness doesn't change that. Whether you sleep on silk sheets or concrete, the fact remains, you're mine now. And every time your father sees you with my ring on your finger, my name attached to yours, it will kill him a little bit more. That's twisted, Elena whispered. Yes. Damien's smile was sad and sharp. But it's honest. And honestly is more than your father ever gave my family. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. Elena stood alone in her beautiful cage, watching the sunset paint the valley in colors that hurt to look at. 210 days. She walked to the bookshelf and pulled out Pride and Prejudice, her favorite, the one she'd read a dozen times, the one that promised happy endings were possible even when everything seemed impossible. She opened to the first page, settling into the reading nook that Damien Rousseau had created for a woman he claimed to hate. It is a truth universally acknowledged, that a single man in possession of a good fortune, must be in want of a wife. Elena laughed, a broken, bitter sound. If only Jane Austen had known how complicated that truth could become. Elena spent the next hour unpacking in mechanical silence. Hanging dresses in the walk-in closet that was bigger than her bathroom at the Hartwell mansion. Arranging toiletries in the marble bathroom that looked like something from a luxury spa. Placing framed photos on the nightstand, her and her mother at her college graduation, her and Michael at the beach when they were children, her grandmother who died when Elena was 16. No photos of her father. She realized with detached interest that she didn't have any candid shots of Richard Hartwell. Only formal family portraits where they all smiled on command, performing happiness for the camera. Her phone, the new one Damien had left on her bed, along with a note in sharp handwriting, "Your old number has been disconnected. This one is secure. D.R. Buzzed at 6:45 p.m. Unknown number, dinner in 15 minutes. First door on the right from the main stairs. Don't make me come get you." Elena stared at the message. Even his texts were commands. She typed back, "Or what?" 3 dots appeared, then, "Or I'll assume you're backing out of our arrangement. Your choice." Of course. Always the threat, always the reminder that she was trapped. Elena deleted the message thread and checked her reflection in the full-length mirror. She'd changed into a simple black dress, Givenchy, elegant but not trying too hard. Let down her hair so it fell in loose waves past her shoulders. Minimal jewelry, just small diamond studs. She looked like she was going to a business dinner, which she supposed she was. Everything with Damien was business. At precisely 7 p.m., Elena descended the stairs and found the dining room. It was the first space in the house that felt remotely warm. A long table made of reclaimed wood dominated the room, surrounded by modern chairs with deep blue velvet cushions. Candles flickered along the center of the table, real candles, not the fake LED kind. The lights were dimmed, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the valley stretched out below, city lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. Damien stood at the head of the table, pouring wine into 2 glasses. He'd changed too, black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, charcoal dress pants. Still barefoot, she noticed. Something about seeing him without shoes made him seem more human, less untouchable. "You're punctual," he said without looking up. "Good. I hate reheating food. You cooked?" Elena couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Don't sound so shocked. I've been taking care of myself since I was 7 years old." He finally looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "You look appropriate." "High praise," Elena said dryly, moving to the chair he indicated with a nod. "Should I curtsy?" "Save the attitude for public appearances. In private, we can at least be civil." He pushed a wine glass toward her. "Chateau Margaux, 2010. Your favorite, according to the sommelier at that restaurant you went to for your birthday last year." Elena's skin prickled. "You really have been watching everything. I told you. I'm thorough." Damien disappeared into the kitchen, apparently they were doing this without staff, and returned with 2 plates. He set one in front of Elena with surprising grace. Pan-seared salmon with asparagus and roasted fingerling potatoes. Simple but perfectly executed. The aroma made Elena's stomach growl, she'd forgotten she hadn't eaten since breakfast. "This looks amazing," she admitted reluctantly. "Tastes better." Damien took his seat at the head of the table, to her right. Close enough to reach out and touch, far enough to maintain distance. "Eat. We need to discuss wedding logistics, and I'd prefer to do it while the food is hot." Elena picked up her fork, cutting into the salmon. It was perfect, crispy skin, tender flesh, seasoned with herbs she couldn't quite identify. She took a bite and had to suppress a moan. It was possibly the best salmon she'd ever tasted. "You actually can cook," she said, taking another bite. Surprised? Damien's smile was thin. "What did you think I did before I made my fortune?" "I worked in restaurants, Elena. Dishwasher at first, then line cook. Spent 5 years learning from the best chefs in Chicago while I built my first company. Cooking is about precision, timing, chemistry. Turns out those skills translate well to tech development." Elena studied him over her wine glass. "Tell me about your first company." "Why?" His voice was sharp, suspicious. "Because we're going to be married in 3 days, and all I know about you is that you hate my father and you're unervingly good at stalking people." Elena set down her glass. If I'm going to play the devoted wife, I need to know basic things. Like what you do for a living beyond tech billionaire. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and tired. Software security. He said finally. My first company developed encryption protocols for financial institutions. I was 22, fresh out of community college with a computer science degree I'd paid for by working 3 jobs. I'd been coding since I was 13, taught myself on library computers because I couldn't afford my own. He took a drink of wine, his eyes distant. I saw a vulnerability in the banking system that no one else had noticed. Built a program to fix it, pitched it to banks that wouldn't give me the time of day because I was a broke kid from nowhere with no connections. Finally, one small credit union in Michigan took a chance. Within a year, I'd secured their entire network. Within 2 years, I had contracts with 15 more banks. By year 5, I sold the company for $50 million. Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. 50 million at 27. 62 million, actually. But who's counting? His smile was sharp. I used that money to start my next company. Then the next. Each one bigger, more ambitious. Now I have my hands in everything: cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, renewable energy, aerospace engineering. I'm worth about 12 billion at last count, though it fluctuates with the market. $12 billion. The number was so large it didn't seem real. Elena's entire family fortune, before her father had gambled it away, had been maybe 200 million. You built all that yourself, Elena said quietly. No family money, no connections, no safety net. Just, you. And rage. Damien's eyes were dark. Don't romanticize it, Elena. I didn't build an empire because I was passionate about technology. I built it because I needed to become powerful enough to destroy the people who destroyed me. Every company, every dollar, every success, it was all fuel for this moment. That's a lot of pressure to put on revenge. Elena took another sip of wine. What if it doesn't satisfy you? What if you destroy my father and you're still empty? Then I'll find something else to destroy. But his voice lacked conviction. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The jazz continued to play softly. Coltrane, Elena recognized. My favorite things. Strange choice for a man who claimed to feel nothing but hatred. The wedding, Damien said finally, getting back to business. The planner will be here tomorrow at 9, as I mentioned. Your mother is welcome to attend the meeting if she wants. I don't care either way. She'd like that. Elena pushed asparagus around her plate. What about my brother? Michael is at Princeton. Can he come to the wedding? Of course. He's on the guest list. Damien refilled their wine glasses. I'm not trying to separate you from your family, Elena. I'm just trying to make them suffer. There's a difference. Is there? Elena's laugh was bitter. Seems like the same thing to me. Your brother is innocent in this. He was barely born when your father destroyed my family. Damien's expression softened slightly. I have no quarrel with him. Or with your mother, really. She's just collateral damage, like you. We're all collateral damage in your war. Elena set down her fork, suddenly not hungry anymore. You realize that, right? Whatever satisfaction you get from this revenge, it comes at the cost of people who never asked to be involved in your trauma. My trauma? Damien's voice went cold. Is that what we're calling it? Trauma? Like it's something I should get therapy for and move past. Isn't it? Elena met his eyes steadily. You were 7 years old when your world fell apart. That's textbook childhood trauma. And instead of processing it, healing from it, you've spent 30 years building weapons to fight a war that should have ended decades ago. You have no idea what you're talking about. Damien stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You've lived your whole life in a bubble of privilege and safety. You've never had to wonder where your next meal was coming from. Never had to sleep in shelters or foster homes with people who saw you as a paycheck. Never had to fight for every scrap of dignity while the world told you that you were nothing. He was breathing hard now, the careful control he always maintained starting to crack. So don't you dare sit there in your designer dress, in this house I built with my own blood and sweat, and psychoanalyze me like I'm some broken toy that needs fixing. I'm not broken. I'm focused. There's a difference. Elena stood too, refusing to be intimidated. You're right. I don't know what you went through. I can't imagine that level of pain and loss. But I know what trauma does to people, Damien. I know how it twists them, makes them into things they're not. And I'm looking at you right now, at this brilliant, powerful man who's spent his entire adult life planning revenge instead of building a real life, and all I see is that 7-year-old boy who never got to grieve properly. Stop. The word was almost a growl. Why? Because it's true. Because somewhere under all that rage and calculation, you know I'm right. Because, Damien closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. Not rough, but firm. Desperate. Because I can't afford to be that 7-year-old boy. Not now. Not when I'm this close to making your father pay for what he did. They were so close Elena could see the war raging behind his eyes, the man he'd become versus the child he'd been. Could see the moment he realized how he was touching her, how his thumbs were tracing small circles on her bare shoulders, how his breath had gone ragged. He dropped his hands like she'd burned him and stepped back, running a hand over his head in a gesture that was becoming familiar. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I shouldn't have, that was inappropriate. You grabbed me, Elena said, her own heart racing. Not the other way around. I know. It won't happen again. Damien's jaw was tight. You should finish your dinner. I'm not hungry anymore. Elena crossed her arms, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. And I think we're done discussing the wedding for tonight. Fine. Damien moved to the windows, staring out at the darkness. Your schedule for tomorrow: wedding planner at 9, dress fitting at 2, meeting with the photographer at 4. I'll be in meetings most of the day, but I'll join you for the photographer meeting. We need engagement photos for the press release. Of course. Can't have people thinking this isn't a real love story. Elena's voice dripped sarcasm. No, we can't. Damien turned back to her, his mask firmly in place again. Which means you need to learn how to look at me like you're in love. Think you can manage that? I'm an excellent actress, Elena said coolly. I convinced myself I loved Adrian for 2 years. Pretending to love you should be easy in comparison. Something that might have been hurt flashed across Damien's face. Was it really all pretend? With Adrian? The question caught Elena off guard. She opened her mouth to give a flippant answer, then stopped. Because he'd been honest with her, brutally, painfully honest, and maybe she owed him the same courtesy. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I cared about him. I wanted to love him. He was kind, stable, safe. Everything I thought I was supposed to want. But was it real love? The kind that makes you crazy, that consumes you? She shook her head. No. I don't think so. I think I was in love with the idea of him, with the future he represented. And he deserved better than that. And now he thinks you're a gold digger who traded up. Damien's voice was flat. That must hurt. Less than it should, Elena said. Which probably proves I never really loved him at all. They stood in the dimly lit dining room, the untouched food growing cold on the table, the candles burning down, the jazz still playing its melancholy tune. 2 people trapped in a situation. Neither had fully chosen, trying to navigate a future neither fully understood. "I'm tired," Elena said finally. "I think I'll go to bed." "Elena." Damien's voice stopped her at the door. She turned back. "For what it's worth, you were right. Earlier. About the trauma, about the 7-year-old boy. You're the first person who's ever seen that. Who's ever looked past the money and the power and the revenge plot and seen the wound underneath." Elena's throat tightened. "Does it help? Knowing that someone sees it?" "I don't know yet." Damien's smile was sad and genuine. "Ask me again in 210 days. Elena nodded and left him standing alone in the dining room, surrounded by the evidence of an effort at domesticity that had crumbled under the weight of too much honesty. She climbed the stairs to her beautiful cage, changed into silk pajamas she'd never worn, and crawled into the massive bed that felt far too empty. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the lights of the city below, thousands of people living their normal lives while hers spun further and further into surreal territory. In 3 days, she'd marry a man who hated her family. In 7 months, she'd divorce him and try to piece together some semblance of a normal life. But tonight, all she could think about was the look in Damien's eyes when she'd called him that 7-year-old boy. The flash of vulnerability before the walls slammed back up. The way his hands had trembled slightly when he'd touched her shoulders. He was right about one thing, they were both trapped. Just in different cages, built from different traumas. Maybe that was something. Or maybe it was just another lie she was telling herself to survive. Elena closed her eyes and tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in this enormous house, Damien Rousseau was probably lying awake too, wrestling with demons that had haunted him for 30 years. It wasn't her job to save him. She had to keep telling herself that. It wasn't her job to save him. Even if part of her, a small, dangerous part, was starting to wonder what would happen if she tried. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her bedroom at the Hartwell mansion. For one blissful moment, she thought the previous day had been a nightmare. Then she saw the new phone on the nightstand, the unpacked suitcase in the corner, the view of the valley through windows that went from floor to ceiling. Real. All of it was horrifyingly real. Her phone showed 7:43 a.m. and one new message from Damien, sent at 6:30, breakfast in the kitchen when you're ready. Wedding planner arrives at 9. Don't be late. Elena dragged herself out of bed and into the bathroom. The shower was ridiculous, a glass-enclosed space with rain showerheads, body jets, and what looked like a built-in sound system. She turned on the water and let it run hot enough to scald, trying to wash away the lingering strangeness of waking up in Damien Rousseau's house. By 8:30, she was dressed in cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her armor firmly in place. She descended the stairs following the smell of coffee and found the kitchen bathed in morning light. Damien sat at the island counter, laptop open, wearing reading glasses she hadn't seen before and a gray t-shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the musculature underneath. His tattoos seemed even more intricate in the daylight, she could make out what looked like a phoenix rising from flames on his left forearm. "You wear glasses," Elena said, because apparently her brain had decided to lead with the obvious. Damien looked up, and she caught the briefest flash of self-consciousness before his usual mask slid into place. "Only when I'm working. I strain." He nodded toward the coffee maker. "Help yourself. There's fruit and yogurt in the fridge, bagels in the bread box." Elena poured herself coffee. Coffee, black, 2 sugars, exactly how she liked it, and noticed he'd already set out her favorite creamer. Of course he had. The man missed nothing. "Did you sleep?" she asked, taking the stool across from him. "Some." His eyes didn't leave his laptop screen. "I'm finalizing the press release about our engagement. Want to hear it? Do I have a choice?" "Not really." But there was almost, humor in his voice. He cleared his throat and began reading, Tech entrepreneur Damien Russo and Elena Hartwell are delighted to announce their engagement and upcoming nuptials. The couple, who met at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala in July, discovered an immediate and profound connection. "Elena is the most genuine, compassionate person I've ever met," says Russo. "When you know, you know." The intimate ceremony will take place this Saturday at Russo's private estate, with close family and friends in attendance. Elena nearly choked on her coffee. The Children's Hospital Gala. "We've never even met before yesterday." "Actually, we did meet at that gala. Briefly. You were there with Adrian, and I was speaking on a panel about tech philanthropy. We shook hands for approximately 4 seconds. Damien's smile was sharp. See? Not entirely a lie. Just, creatively interpreted. And the most genuine, compassionate person part? Pure fiction." He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "But it sounds good. Romantic. The media will eat it up." "What about my quote?" Elena asked dryly. "Don't I get to gush about how amazing you are?" "Thought you'd never ask." Damien scrolled down. "Damien is unlike anyone I've ever met. His passion for making the world better, combined with his brilliant mind and generous heart, swept me off my feet. I couldn't imagine spending my life with anyone else." "Generous heart," Elena repeated flatly. "The man who's holding my family hostage has a generous heart. It's called marketing, Elena. Try to keep up." But he was watching her carefully, gauging her reaction. "If you hate it, I can change it. Within reason." Elena sighed, taking a bagel from the box and slathering it with cream cheese. "No, it's fine. Disgusting and saccharine, but fine." "When does this masterpiece go out?" "After the photographer meeting this afternoon. I want photos to accompany the announcement." Damien closed his laptop. "Speaking of which, you'll need to practice." "Practice what?" "Looking at me like you're in love." He stood, moving around the island until he was standing in front of her. "The photographer is a professional. She'll know if we're faking it. We need to be convincing." Elena set down her bagel, suddenly not hungry. "You want to practice, romance? Now? In the kitchen at 8 in the morning? No time like the present." Damien held out his hand. "Come on. Let's see what you've got." This was surreal. This was absolutely, completely surreal. But Elena took his hand anyway, letting him pull her to standing. His palm was warm, calloused in unexpected places, evidence of a life that hadn't always been lived in luxury. "Okay," Elena said, trying to ignore how close they were standing. "So I just, look at you adoringly?" "For starters." Damien's free hand came up to her waist, settling there with surprising gentleness. "Pretend I'm Adrian. Pretend we're at some charity event and you need to convince everyone you're happy. That's easy. I'm an expert at faking happiness at charity events." But when Elena looked up at him, really looked, she found herself momentarily distracted by his eyes. In the morning light, they weren't just dark brown. They had flecks of amber and gold, like whiskey held up to sunlight. "Better," Damien murmured. "But you look curious, not in love. There's a difference." "Maybe I am curious." Elena's voice came out softer than intended. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A monster, I think. Someone cold and cruel straight through. But you cook dinner and fill bookshelves with my favorite authors and make sure the coffee is ready in the morning." She shook her head slightly. "It's confusing." "Good." Damien's thumb traced a small circle, probably unconscious. "Confusion keeps you off balance. Makes this easier. For you or for me?" "Both." His other hand came up to cup her face, tilting it slightly. "Now stop thinking and just feel. What would it be like if this were real? If we actually met at that gala and felt something neither of us expected? Elena let herself imagine it. A different world where Damien wasn't her father's enemy, where she wasn't collateral damage in a decades-old war. A world where this brilliant, damaged, complicated man had simply seen her across a crowded room and wanted to know her. Something must have shown on her face because Damien's breath caught. "There," he whispered. "Right there. That's the look." "What look?" But Elena's heart was racing, her skin tingling where he touched her. "Like you're seeing something you didn't know you wanted until this moment." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a touch so gentle it made her ache. "Like you're terrified and exhilarated all at once." "Maybe I am," Elena admitted. Because standing here in the morning light, with his hands on her and his eyes seeing too much, she felt something shift. Something dangerous and impossible and utterly foolish. The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Damien stepped back immediately, the walls slamming back into place so fast it gave Elena whiplash. "That'll be your mother. I told her to arrive early so you two could talk before the planner gets here." "You invited my mother?" Elena blinked, trying to reorient herself. "You said she'd want to be involved." "I'm not a complete monster, Elena. Despite what you think." He was already moving toward the door, his mask firmly in place. "Come on. Time to play happy families." Elena followed on unsteady legs, her face still burning from where he'd touched her. That moment in the kitchen, what was that? Chemistry? Stockholm Syndrome? Simple loneliness making her read meaning into practiced seduction? She didn't have time to analyze it because her mother was suddenly there, sweeping into the foyer in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and nervous energy. "Elena, sweetheart." Margaret pulled her into a tight hug. "I barely slept. I kept thinking about you here, all alone with," she caught herself, glancing at Damien. "That is, I mean. It's fine, Mrs. Hartwell." Damien's smile was polite, distant. "I understand your concern. Your daughter is precious cargo, after all. Can't have the merchandise damaged before the transaction is complete." "Damien," Elena said sharply. "What?" "I'm being honest." But there was something in his eyes that suggested he was testing Margaret, pushing to see how she'd react. Margaret surprised them both by laughing, a short, bitter sound. "At least you're not pretending this is something it's not. That's more than my husband ever did." She turned to Elena. "Has he been treating you well?" "He made me dinner last night," Elena said carefully. "Salmon. It was actually delicious." "You cooked for her?" Margaret looked at Damien with genuine surprise. "Richard can barely operate a microwave. Richard is an entitled prick who's never had to take care of himself a day in his life," Damien said conversationally. "I, on the other hand, spent my formative years learning that if I wanted to eat, I'd better figure out how to feed myself." The casual mention of his childhood, the poverty, the struggle, made Margaret flinch. "Mr. Russo, I want you to know, what Richard did to your family all those years ago. I didn't know about it. Not until recently. If I had known." "You would have done nothing," Damien interrupted, not unkindly. "Because you were too busy enjoying the lifestyle his crimes afforded you." "I don't blame you, Mrs. Hartwell. You're as much a victim of Richard's choices as anyone. But let's not pretend you're innocent either." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You're right. I've spent 30 years looking the other way, telling myself that if I didn't ask questions, I couldn't be held responsible for the answers. I'm ashamed of that. More ashamed than you know." "Mom," Elena reached for her mother's hand. "No, let me say this." Margaret squared her shoulders, meeting Damien's eyes directly. "What you're doing, this revenge plot, this marriage, it's cruel and it's going to hurt my daughter. But I understand it. If someone had destroyed my family the way Richard destroyed yours, I'd want revenge too. So I'm not going to stand here and lecture you about morality or ask you to reconsider. I'm just going to ask one thing, don't take out all of your rage on Elena. She was a child when this happened. She's innocent. No one is innocent, Damien said quietly. But I'll try to remember that she's not the primary target. That's the best I can offer. I suppose it will have to be enough. Margaret wiped her eyes. Now, where is this wedding planner? I may not approve of this marriage, but I'll be damned if my daughter doesn't have a beautiful wedding anyway. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was the wedding planner, a striking woman in her 50s named Celeste who swept in with 3 assistants, all carrying massive binders and fabric samples. Mr. Russo, Elena, what a pleasure. Celeste's energy was overwhelming at 9 in the morning. I have to say, when Mr. Russo called me last week and said he needed a wedding planned in 10 days, I thought he was joking. But here we are. And let me tell you, this is going to be spectacular. Last week? Elena looked at Damien. You called her last week? Before you even had me to agree? I don't plan for failure, Damien said smoothly. Celeste, why don't you set up in the living room? I need to take a call, but Elena and her mother will work with you on the details. He disappeared before Elena could call him out on his arrogance, leaving her alone with her mother and a wedding planner who clearly thought this was the romance of the century. Now, Celeste said, spreading out fabric samples across the coffee table. Let's talk flowers. Mr. Russo mentioned white roses and calla lilies, but I thought we might add some. Whatever Damien chose is fine, Elena interrupted. She couldn't muster enthusiasm for flower choices when her entire life felt like it was spiraling out of control. Celeste's perfectly painted smile faltered slightly. Are you sure? This is your wedding, dear. You should have input. It's not really my wedding, though, is it? Elena's voice came out harder than she intended. It's a business arrangement dressed up in tulle and roses. So let's just go with whatever makes the best photos and call it a day. Elena, her mother said softly. A warning and a plea. I'm sorry. Elena rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. I didn't mean that. This is all happening very fast. Whirlwind romances often do, Celeste said diplomatically. But that's what makes them so magical. Now, let's talk about the ceremony itself. Mr. Russo mentioned you'd be getting married in the garden behind the house. I took the liberty of scouting it yesterday, it's absolutely stunning. We'll set up an arch overlooking the valley, chairs for 50 guests, string lights for ambience. She continued talking, pulling out photos and sketches, and Elena tried to pay attention. She really did. But all she could think about was Damien's hands on her waist, his thumb on her cheek, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. It was practice. Just practice. He'd said so himself. So why did it feel like something more? The dress. Celeste's exclamation pulled Elena back to the present. I have 3 options ready for your fitting this afternoon. All custom designed based on Mr. Russo's description of your style and measurements. I think you're going to love them. Based on Damien's description. Elena felt that familiar prickle of being watched, studied, catalogued. Of course. He's very attentive, Celeste said warmly. He knew your favorite flowers, your preferred color palette, even the designer you wore to your college graduation. That level of attention to detail. That's love, darling. Margaret made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been suppressed laughter. Elena couldn't tell. They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail, from the menu, filet mignon or Chilean sea bass, to the music, string quartet or jazz trio, to the wedding favors, imported chocolates or custom candles. Elena made choices when pressed, but mostly she let Celeste run with her vision of an intimate, elegant affair that reflects the depth of your connection. If only she knew there was no connection. Just a contract and a revenge plot and 2 people pretending to be something they weren't. Finally, mercifully, Celeste and her assistants packed up their binders and samples. The dress fitting is at 2 o'clock at the boutique downtown. I've already sent the address to your phone. Your mother is welcome to come, of course. I wouldn't miss it, Margaret said, though her smile was strained. After Celeste left, Elena and her mother sat in the living room in exhausted silence. That woman has more energy than should be legal, Margaret finally said. She thinks this is real, Elena murmured. She thinks Damien and I are madly in love and planning our dream wedding. The cognitive dissonance is exhausting. Welcome to my life. Margaret's voice was dry. I've been pretending everything is fine for 30 years. You develop a tolerance. Elena looked at her mother, really looked at her. Margaret Hartwell had been beautiful once, before the weight of maintaining appearances had carved lines around her eyes and mouth. Before the stress of being married to Richard had turned her hair prematurely gray, no matter how much she tried to cover it. With expensive dye jobs. Why did you stay? Elena asked quietly. You must have known what Dad was like. What he was capable of. Why not leave? Margaret was quiet for so long that Elena thought she wouldn't answer. Then, because leaving meant admitting I'd made a mistake. Meant facing the world alone, without the protection of the Hartwell name and money. I told myself I was staying for you and Michael, that you needed a stable home. But really? She met Elena's eyes. I stayed because I was a coward. And I've regretted it every day since. Mom. Don't. Margaret held up a hand. Don't make excuses for me. I made my choices, and now I live with them. Just like you're making yours. She reached over and took Elena's hand. But you're stronger than I ever was. You're going to survive this, and when it's over, you're going to build a life that's actually yours. Not your father's. Not Damien Rousseau's. Yours. Elena squeezed her mother's hand, throat tight with emotion. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you're still alive, still fighting. The day you stop being scared is the day you've given up. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. Now, let's go try on some wedding dresses. At least we can make sure you look stunning while your life falls apart. It was so absurd that Elena laughed, a real laugh, the first one in days. Her mother joined in, and for a moment, they were just two women bound by love and genetics and the shared experience of being casualties in Richard Hartwell's wake. Damien appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of laughter. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching them with an unreadable expression. Something funny? He asked. Everything, Elena said, wiping her eyes. Everything is so ridiculously, absurdly funny that if I don't laugh, I'll cry. Laughter looks better in photos, Damien said. But his eyes, those impossibly complicated eyes, held something that might have been understanding. Your car is waiting to take you to the dress fitting. Marcus will drive. You're not coming. Elena found herself disappointed, which was ridiculous. I don't get to see the dress until the wedding day. Bad luck and all that. His smile was thin. Besides, some traditions even I'm willing to honor. Since when do you care about tradition? Since it gives me plausible deniability to avoid 4 hours of watching you try on white dresses. But there was no heat in his words. Go. Have fun with your mother. I'll see you at 4 for the photographer. He disappeared back into whatever cave he worked from, leaving Elena with the distinct impression that Damien Rousseau was just as confused about what was happening between them as she was. And somehow, that made her feel a little less alone. The bridal boutique was everything Elena had imagined when she dreamed of her wedding to Adrian, all cream marble and crystal chandeliers, with champagne served in delicate flutes and consultants who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about finding the one. Now, standing in the dressing room in her underwear while a consultant named Margot fussed with the first dress, Elena felt like she was playing a part in someone else's life. This one is Vera Wong, Margot said, helping Elena step into a cascade of silk and lace. Mr. Russo specifically requested her work. He said something about you mentioning her in an interview 3 years ago. Of course he did. Elena was starting to realize that Damien had a file on her that would put the FBI to shame. The dress was beautiful, an off-the-shoulder mermaid silhouette with intricate beading that caught the light. It hugged every curve, elegant and sexy in equal measure. Elena stared at her reflection and saw a stranger. A bride. Someone about to promise forever to a man who'd made it clear their arrangement had an expiration date. It's stunning, Margaret breathed from the viewing area outside the dressing room. It is, Elena agreed. But her voice was flat, lifeless. Margot's professionally cheerful expression faltered. Would you like to try the others? Sometimes you have to see all the options to know which one speaks to you. Elena nodded mutely and let herself be undressed and redressed like a doll. The second dress was Monique Louillier, a ball gown with layers of tulle and a sweetheart neckline. Beautiful, but too much. Too fairy tale for a wedding built on lies. The third dress made Elena's breath catch. It was simpler than the others, Ellie Saab, column silhouette with long sleeves made entirely of delicate lace. The neckline was high but sheer, somehow managing to be both modest and seductive. It was elegant, timeless, and when Elena looked in the mirror, she actually looked like herself. Just, a more ethereal version. That's the one, Margaret said quietly. It is, Elena whispered, surprised by the tears that suddenly blurred her vision. She shouldn't care. This was a fake wedding, a business transaction. But standing here in this dress, she felt the weight of what she was giving up, the real wedding she'd never have, the love story that would never be hers. Oh, honey. Margaret was suddenly beside her, wrapping her arms around Elena from behind so they were both reflected in the mirror. It's okay to mourn what you thought you'd have. Even if this is necessary, even if you're being brave, it's still okay to grieve. I don't even know what I'm grieving, Elena said, wiping her eyes carefully so she wouldn't ruin the dress. Adrian? The future I planned? Or just the idea that my life was my own? All of it, Margaret said. You're allowed to grieve all of it. They stood like that for a long moment, mother and daughter wrapped together in front of a mirror, both of them casualties of Richard Hartwell's choices in different ways. We'll take this one, Margaret told Margot, who'd been discreetly pretending not to notice the emotional moment. What alterations are needed? While Margot made notes and measurements, Elena changed back into her clothes, feeling like she was removing a costume. The dress would be ready by Friday, the day before the wedding. Everything was moving so fast, like a train racing toward a cliff with no way to slow down. They were signing paperwork when Elena's new phone buzzed. Damien. Unknown number, how was the dress shopping? Find something that will make me look like the luckiest man alive. Elena stared at the message. Was he, joking? Was Damien Russo capable of humor that wasn't barbed and cruel? She typed back, found something that will make me look like I'm not being held hostage. Close enough. 3 dots appeared, then, I'll take it. See you at 4. Don't be late. The photographer is even more terrifying than the wedding planner. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Then immediately felt guilty for smiling. She shouldn't be developing rapport with her captor. Stockholm Syndrome was real, and she needed to be careful. But as she and her mother climbed into the Mercedes where Marcus waited, Elena couldn't shake the memory of that morning, Damien's hand on her face, his voice going soft when he said, "That's the look." The way he'd seemed just as surprised as she was by whatever had passed between them. He's getting to you, Margaret observed quietly as they drove. What? No. I'm just. Elena. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. I've been watching you all day. The way you check your phone, the way your expression changes when you talk about him. You're starting to see him as human instead of monster. Is that so wrong? Elena asked defensively. He is human. Damaged and angry and using me as a weapon, but still human. It's not wrong. It's dangerous. Margaret took her daughter's hand. Because men like Damien Rousseau, they don't know how to separate revenge from everything else. If you get tangled up in his emotional web, if you start caring about him, he'll destroy you without meaning to. Not because he's evil, but because he's broken, and broken people break other people. I'm not going to fall for him, Elena said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. I know what this is. A transaction. An arrangement. 7 months and then I'm free. Just promise me you'll be careful. With your heart. Margaret's eyes were sad. I'd hate to see you make the same mistakes I did, confusing intensity for love, trauma for connection. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Because her mother was right. There was something magnetic about Damien, something that pulled at her despite her better judgment. Maybe it was the glimpses of vulnerability beneath his armor. Maybe it was recognizing a fellow prisoner, just locked in a different cage. Or maybe it was simply that he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had. Whatever it was dangerous. They arrived back at Damien's fortress at 3:30, giving Elena half an hour to prepare herself for the photographer. She changed into a different outfit, a soft pink dress that Celeste had texted her about, saying it would photograph beautifully and complement Mr. Rousseau's complexion. The fact that there was now a stylist coordinating their outfits based on complementary color theory was just another surreal detail in an increasingly surreal situation. Elena was touching up her makeup when she heard voices downstairs. Male, deep, laced with easy laughter. She descended the stairs to find Damien with another man, black, probably late 30s, with an easy smile and expensive camera equipment spread across the living room. Elena. Damien's voice was warm, welcoming, his public voice, she was starting to recognize. This is Marcus Thompson, the photographer. No relation to my Marcus, despite the name. Ms. Hartwell. Marcus the photographer extended his hand with genuine warmth. I have to say, I've been following Mr. Rousseau's work for years, and when he told me he'd found someone special, I couldn't wait to meet you. The feeling is mutual, Elena lied smoothly, slipping into her own public persona. Damien has told me wonderful things about your work. Has he? Marcus looked at Damien with surprise. You never struck me as the type to give compliments. I'm full of surprises, Damien said dryly. He'd changed too, dark jeans and a perfectly fitted navy button-down that made his eyes look even more intense. The sleeves were rolled up, revealing his tattoos in all their intricate glory. He looked casual and expensive and unfairly attractive. Clearly. Marcus began setting up his equipment. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We'll start with some shots in here, natural light, intimate, showing your connection. Then we'll move outside for golden hour shots with the valley in the background. We want these to feel authentic, lived in. Like I'm capturing a real moment between two people who can't keep their hands off each other. No pressure, Elena muttered. Damien heard her and smiled, a real smile, not his usual sharp one. He moved to her side, his hand finding the small of her back. Just like this morning, he murmured in her ear. Pretend I'm someone you chose. Someone you want. Method acting. Got it. But Elena's pulse was already racing from his proximity, from the heat of his hand through the thin fabric of her dress. Perfect, Marcus said, peering through his camera. Just like that. Damien turned toward her slightly. Elena, look up at him. Good. Now say something to each other. Something private. I want to capture intimacy. Damien's dark eyes met hers. You look beautiful, he said quietly. That dress is perfect on you. Thank you. Elena forced herself to maintain eye contact. You clean up pretty well yourself. I wasn't planning to wear a shirt at all, but Marcus insisted. His lips quirked. Something about professional standards and this isn't a romance novel cover shoot. Elena laughed, genuinely laughed, and the camera clicked rapid fire. Gorgeous. Marcus called out. That right there. That's what we need. More of that. They spent the next hour posing in various configurations. Sitting on the couch with Damien's arm around her shoulders. Standing by the windows with her back against his chest. His hand in her hair, her fingers on his tattooed forearm, their faces close enough that Elena could feel his breath. It should have felt awkward, forced. Instead, it felt easy. Natural. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Okay, let's get some shots outside before we lose the light, Marcus said finally. The golden hour wait for no one. They moved to the garden, an expansive space Elena hadn't fully explored yet. Marcus positioned them on a stone pathway with the valley dropping away behind them, the setting sun painting everything in shades. Gold and amber. Damien, stand behind Elena. Wrap your arms around her waist. Elena, lean back against him. Like you're completely comfortable, completely safe. Marcus adjusted his lens. Perfect. Now Damien, say something that makes her smile. A real smile, not a polite one. Damien's arms tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His mouth was close to her ear when he spoke, his voice pitched low so only she could hear. You know what's funny? This morning, when I was touching your face, trying to teach you how to look in love. He paused. I forgot for a second that I was supposed to be acting. Elena's breath caught. She turned her head slightly to look at him, forgetting about the camera, forgetting about Marcus, forgetting about everything except the man holding her and the confession he'd just made. What are you saying? She whispered. I don't know. Damien's expression was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I'm saying this is more complicated than I planned. I'm saying you're more than I expected. I'm saying. Perfect. Marcus's voice shattered the moment. Oh my God, that was incredible. The way you looked at each other. That's not something you can fake. That's real chemistry. Damien released Elena so abruptly she stumbled. His walls slammed back up, his face going carefully blank. Got what you need? More than enough. Marcus was grinning, scrolling through his camera. These are going to be stunning. The press is going to eat this up. Hell, I'm eating this up, and I'm usually immune to romance. Great. Damien's voice was clipped. Send the edited versions to my email by tomorrow morning. I want to release the announcement by noon. You got it. Marcus started packing up his equipment, oblivious to the tension that had descended. Congratulations, you two. I've shot a lot of engagement photos, and I can always tell which couples are going to make it. You guys? You're going to make it. If only he knew. After Marcus left, Elena and Damien stood in the garden in painful silence. The sun had fully set now, and the automatic lights had kicked on, casting everything in cool blue tones. What you said, Elena started. Forget it. Damien's voice was harsh. I was just playing the part. Getting into character for the photos. It didn't mean anything. Didn't it? Elena moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at her. Because it felt like something. Feelings are irrelevant. But Damien's jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. This arrangement has a purpose. Your father's destruction. That's all that matters. What if it's not? Elena heard herself say. What if there's more happening here than revenge? What if we're both feeling something neither of us planned for? Then we ignore it. Damien's eyes were hard. We push it down and pretend it doesn't exist, because the alternative is unthinkable. Why? Why is it unthinkable? Because. The word exploded out of him. Because I've spent 30 years building toward this moment. 30 years planning, preparing, becoming powerful enough to make your father pay. I can't let anything, not even you, especially not you, derail that. Don't you understand? Caring about you makes you my weakness. And I can't afford weaknesses. So you'd rather stay alone in your anger forever? Elena's voice broke. You'd rather spend your whole life pursuing revenge than take a chance on something real? Yes. The word was final. Because revenge is all I have. It's all I've ever had. Without it, I'm just a broken kid who never recovered from his trauma. At least the revenge gives me purpose. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, Elena whispered. Then you haven't heard much. Damien turned away from her, staring out at the valley where city lights were beginning to twinkle. I'm going to work. There's dinner in the fridge if you're hungry. Good night, Elena. He walked away, leaving her alone in the garden with the ghost of his confession hanging in the air between them. Elena stood there until the cold drove her inside, her mind replaying everything. The way he'd held her. The things he'd said. The panic in his eyes when he'd realized he was feeling something he hadn't planned for. Margaret was right. Damien Russo was dangerous, not because he was cruel, but because he was broken in a way that mirrored her own brokenness. Two damaged people finding comfort in each other's cages. That way lay disaster. But as Elena climbed the stairs to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that disaster might already be inevitable. That the moment she'd agreed to this arrangement, she'd set something in motion that neither of them could control. In 2 days, she'd marry him. In 7 months, she'd divorce him. But what happened in between? What happened when revenge met something it hadn't anticipated? When hate started transforming into something softer, more dangerous, more real? Elena didn't have answers. All she knew was that somewhere in this glass fortress, Damien was probably wrestling with the same questions, equally terrified of what the answers might be. And somehow, that made her feel less alone. Even if it probably shouldn't.